Hello. Or were you going to do that?
I don't know.
I can see how much of a shit show this is about to be. Anyway, well, that's a nice clip for the beginning. Hello, welcome back to Manic Minds. Today, I'm going to do something that we've been putting off for approximately 4 weeks. I believe the last time we recorded, I was like, oh, it might be next week, and then 3 weeks later.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the floor is kind of a bit more yours today, because obviously this is something that you've got a lot more lived experience of than I personally have, although obviously like my knowledge of it will come from a bit more of a sort of clinical perspective. But obviously we want to talk about DBT skills.
Yeah.
Exclusively.
Yeah, I mean, kind of the way that I'm thinking about it is for me personally, the handful of skills that are like, you want to survive, you want to be able to get to a point that you are getting the help that you need. These are like my bread and butter for day-to-day maintenance, for day-to-day just survival of the first, essentially.
Yeah. But I suppose, for anyone who's thinking that we've just missed saying CBT, like what is DBT? It's something that not as many people have heard of, I suppose.
Dialectical behavioural therapy. It focuses on some very key areas. So the main use of it is for treatment of personality disorders, which, I mean, if you watch this regularly, then you'll know I am one of those people diagnosed with a personality disorder, emotionally unstable personality disorder, or better known as borderline personality disorder. So get ready for that stigma, because love that. But it's more used for like treatment of personality disorders over anything else. It focuses on emotional regulation, which, emotionally unstable emotional regulation, kind of a key point there. Yeah. Interpersonal relationships, so interaction with other people and how to manage your relationships. And then the dreaded M word, that if you're in the realm of mental health, you've heard before, mindfulness, and distress tolerance.
Yeah, I was going to say mindfulness. Obviously, we've done a video on that, which people can check out.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, cut you off a bit there, but like bluntly, a lot of this is embedded in mindfulness, like most psychology skills and like distress tolerance skills. It's embedded in mindfulness, and I mean, I know that you're not a big fan of me saying this. I'm going to say it anyway. I'm one of those people who I'm like, I'm not doing this. This is fucking stupid. Like, this just sounds ridiculous. Like, it's stupid. I'm not doing it. But I'm going to preface this by saying, yes, it sounds stupid. Like 90% of the things that I'm going to say in this video, you're going to listen to and go, that just sounds ridiculous. Like, I'm not trying that. Yeah, just try it, because I promise you now it works. Like, do I think that there are some things that I literally will look at and go, that actually sounds ridiculous. How could that ever possibly work? It does.
Yeah.
And you know what, at this point in my life, after being well for, what did I say it was last night? Because it was bang on the day. Was it 28 months, isn't it? Yeah, 28 months. It works. Despite the fact that it sounds fucking ridiculous, it works.
Yeah. I suppose it sounds a bit more, because obviously my knowledge of CBT obviously is a lot more deep, and I've studied it quite extensively. And I suppose I'm just trying to think of like the difference, because I think a lot of people would have heard of CBT and have a general idea of what it is.
Cognitive behavioural therapy, for anyone who doesn't.
I like the emphasis on the C, the cognitive. So it tends to be something that is more kind of targeted at thought and behavioural patterns, and it's seen as something that you can kind of do kind of on your own. Like, it's a sort of like the cliche of the therapist giving you some homework to do in between sessions. It's normally CBT based. It's normally you sit with your journal, kind of analyse your thoughts and analyse your behaviour patterns and stuff. Whereas I think DBT, like you just said there, it's a bit more like interpersonal.
Yeah.
I think that's the way you've described it to me before, is that it's more kind of tailored towards like how to manage like relationships with other people.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, like, one of the big things for people with personality disorders is that we struggle maintaining relationships long term in any capacity. Like, you tend to find people who are diagnosed with personality disorders have very unstable relationships, both romantically and friendships and, work relationships, everything. Like, it is, I mean, like, we use mine as the example, emotionally unstable personality disorder. Like, the clue is literally in the name, emotionally unstable.
Yeah.
There's instability that ripples through my life on a daily basis because of the way that my brain is wired to think and react and handle everything, essentially.
Yeah.
And I think the one key point, because there's people in my life who have the same diagnosis and that they're more at the beginning of their journey. And the one thing that I found I've been having to emphasize, so I kind of want to make the point early on, these skills are not things that are going to just make everything go away and that you're going to be neurotypical and just be like normal.
Yeah.
Like, inverted commas for anyone just listening. They are everyday skills that you have to practice if you want them to become normal.
Yeah.
Like, I'm at a point now where I don't even know I'm using skills. Like, it's not something that I do consciously 99% of the time anymore. Obviously, you've seen us sometimes be like, just, I need to do this. But most of the time, it is completely unconscious.
Yeah.
Because I've just done it for so long and practiced using it for so long that now my brain goes, we're feeling this, check the facts, inappropriate, react like this. And it does it all in milliseconds.
Yeah. And it's, it's a common thing with maybe someone who's kind of new to the journey of analysing their mental health. And, it would be lovely to know that there are kind of quick fix cures out there. But, like I don't think the sort of the therapy industry would survive if all it took was one session for someone just to be like, right, tell me what to do, right, and bang. But then I suppose I always like to do this. I always like to emphasize that there shouldn't necessarily be this huge divide between people with relatively decent mental health versus people with mental illness. Like, there's things that you can relate to even if you don't have the conditions of personality disorders. And what you just said there about skills, like to get through the day and doing them to such an extent that it doesn't feel like you're doing them anymore, it just becomes part of your routine. I mean, like, that's what everybody kind of does day to day. Like, we all know. I say we all know. Like, we all do things. So we get up, we have a breakfast, we brush our teeth, we get changed, like we go out into work or whatever we're doing that day. And we wouldn't necessarily look back on that and think, oh, I took those steps so that I could be in a better frame of mind to go to work. But that is what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's just that it's just so natural to you that it's, So, this is like a layer that, I suppose, unfortunately, if you want to say that, people kind of would need to do, depending on what their conditions are. But it's not a million miles away from what people do anyway. It's just,
I think I've said it to you a few times, like, if I could, I'd DBT the world, because whether you struggle with your mental health or not, DBT skills are all about managing interactions with other people and about, having healthy relationships and keeping yourself in a frame of mind of, like, I mean, anything that, like I say, when we're talking now, I'm going to cover, but like things like wise mind, where you're not reacting from emotion, but you also aren't reacting from pure logic either, because neither of those are helpful. So being in a frame of wise mind, like, all of those kind of things are skills that, I know we've both been outside lately. I think a lot of people could do with having DBT skills to handle interacting with other people, because like, holy shit, with emotional regulation.
And it is it's the onus of everyone to be aware of how they feel in their personal relationships. It's like, again, I think other forms of therapy do tend to be more like too much emphasized on the individual and their brain and the way they operate. And it becomes this kind of thing that you can do, like I say, with CBT, you can kind of do it in your own time. There's a little bit of homework in between your therapy sessions, and it becomes this sort of like almost like lonesome experience of like writing things down in a journal, analyzing them, yada yada yada. Whereas, like a massive part of life is, you know, our interactions with other people, and you know, it's easy for someone to come along and say like, well, you shouldn't worry too much about other people and how you interact with them. It's all about your own happiness, and make sure that, you know, you're doing the things. And it's like, that sounds fine, but we don't live like that.
Yeah.
Like, we need interaction, and we need to have a healthy, like, general relationship with people that are in our lives, because that's a massive contributor to poor mental health, is when that stuff isn't.
I think, to quote you from a few weeks ago, we're social creatures.
Yeah.
Like, it is what it is. No matter how much any of us like with solitude, like the longer you're on your own, the worse you're going to deteriorate.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, you want to like maybe sort of get in it, because you know, I'm aware that there's a video on like skills in particular, and again, a lot of it will be driven by you. So I don't know, like, you mentioned one already, but where do you want to start with it?
I think probably starting point that I would just like to point out, I am not in any way, shape or form qualified with any mental health qualifications. My qualifications come from lived experience. So if anyone is like, that's not pronounced correctly, or like, that's not the definition of that, this is how I utilize them, and this is how this has worked for me.
Yeah.
As someone who had her first episode at 30.
This is a lived experience podcast. You know, that's why I don't mention that often that I'm a therapist, because that's not really the point.
No, it's not.
It's
not at all.
It's more of a lived experience thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Right. So I think probably, I mean, for a start, DBT is a very long course that has a lot of little bits to it. But like I said before, my key points will be driven from the skills that I find I use on a nearly daily basis that are really helpful long term.
Yeah.
One of them that is not so much DBT driven, I think it's just more like driven across, it's drilled into you when you're in services, it's maintenance. And you've touched on it there earlier when you said like people don't realize it, but you know, they do things to be in a better frame of mind for the day. You'll get up and have a shower and have your breakfast, and then get like, you know, and you get dressed and you go outside. Okay, that is considered very normal behavior. People who are severely mentally ill or just struggling in that moment need that to be a list of shit that they've got in front of them to do.
Yeah.
Like, I literally have a list that is titled maintenance list, and it has on there brush my hair, which I'm very well aware it does not look like I've brushed my hair on a regular basis. I just have curly hair. Brush my teeth, get dressed, put some makeup on, go out, get washed. Granted, these are not in order right now, clearly, because I'm not going to get dressed then get washed, but not the point. And go outside. Go outside for at least 15 minutes. Those are key factors in me maintaining a certain level of wellness. And if you are struggling and you need something to just give you that little oomph to start you on the path, making a maintenance list would be my number one priority for you. Don't put too much pressure on it. Literally, if all you have on that maintenance list for your first week is that you've brushed your teeth every day, fine. Okay, so we'll get into the end of week 1, you've brushed your teeth every day, add another thing. We'll get to the end of week 2, add another, until you've got just a solid. I remember Laura saying to me, try not to make it more than 6 tasks. And it needs to be tasks that are not like, you don't want to put on there, like, do an hour of reading every day. Because some days when you're not well, like, that's not going to be possible. But, you know, something like cleaning your teeth, that's good for you. And it takes 2 minutes. That's a lot easier to manage.
So I think we've mentioned this a few times. It's always my thing of like, don't be afraid to aim low enough. You know.
I think I come in the other day and you were listening to a video about it. 1% gains.
Yeah.
Like, literally, just if you can be 1% better today than you were yesterday, you're winning.
Yeah. You know, and that shouldn't be seen as like letting people off the hook or whatever. Like, like you just said there, I think you're much more likely long term to follow a list of things like that, 5 or 6 things that are relatively doable. Well, yeah, relatively, compared to, right, I'm gonna like read for an hour every day. I'm gonna go to the gym every day for an hour. I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z.
I'm gonna eat healthy.
like give it a week and a half, 2 weeks, and like there'll be one of those things that you're not doing at all or not as much of.
Yeah.
And that's the easiest way to start beating yourself up again and thinking like, oh, I can't even do this. I can't move on with my life. But yeah, make it manageable.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, I think it was a couple of weeks ago we were on video call and I was sat at mine and I'd said, yeah, like this room is a shit show. Like I need to fix it, and I just haven't got it in me to do it. So I got my makeup drawer and I sat and I reorganized my makeup drawer and I literally went, yeah, you know what? It's one thing that I've done today that wasn't done yesterday.
Yeah.
To anybody else, they might look and go, Narita, out of all of the things that needed done in this fucking room, the makeup drawer was not really on the top. It wasn't even breaking priority. Right, yeah, but it made me feel better because I'd sat and sorted it out and it's now got a level of organisation to it again.
And to extend that analogy, you know, if like if your room represents your life, then like, you know, you're not a child anymore. If somebody comes in and tells you that they're not happy with how your room is set out, it's like, it's not your room.
Yeah.
Like I've done something that I'm really happy about and I don't care that you see it this way because it's not, you've got your own room to worry about.
Yeah.
I've got my own as well.
I mean, my mum always used to say to me growing up, like, tidy environment, tidy mind. And I really do believe in that. And I do find that when I get to a point that my mind's really cluttered, the first thing I'll do is go, what state are my surroundings in?
Yeah.
Because if there's mess everywhere, it's because I'm not thinking straight. And like it does. I think you see it a lot in like things like schizophrenia and that, like, you know, it's a telltale deterioration sign.
Yeah.
That like the environment gets worse.
Yeah.
But not to get too bogged down on that because it's not particularly DBT related, and I know I've mentioned it before, but I will preach maintenance till the day I die because it is 100% the absolute. It's the foundation that you need to build from, because if you haven't got that in place, you're not going to be able to build. You can't build with wobbly foundations.
Yeah.
So
it's a good place to start. Yeah.
Same as I'm not really going to spend a lot of time talking about my number one favourite DBT skill because I've mentioned it plenty of times. There's a blog post about it. Stop. I'm just going to brush over that really quickly. If you want to have a recap on Stop, it is on the blog. I believe it is called Stop in the Name of Love because that is the song that I sing in my head when I need to do it. Well, used to. I don't have to anymore because it just happens naturally. But when I was learning to use it, it was Stop in the Name of Love to make myself stop.
Yeah.
That's all on there. So I just want to briefly cut over that. Check the facts. Check the facts is a beautiful skill, especially if you are the kind of person who feels like you're the one that's in the wrong all the time.
Yeah.
Like,
sorry, I was going to say, like, straight away, yeah, that I even just hearing the name of that makes a lot of sense and is something that, you know, people can relate to in many different ways because our brains don't always like to focus on facts. I would say, I said this the other day, like our brain is like a tabloid newspaper. Like it will have its agenda and it will seek out evidence or proof that supports its claims, and then stuff that doesn't, it kind of discards.
Yeah.
So it's like your brain is like the Sun newspaper.
Yeah, essentially.
You need to turn it into the Guardian or something. I don't know.
To be fair, just turn it into a non-mainstream paper. Like that would work.
Yeah, that was very elitist of me. I don't know why I chose the Guardian. I don't even like the Guardian that much. I don't care that someone's got a new fucking recipe on carrot cake when the world's burning around them.
But anyway, that's another video. But like, check the facts. I mean, you know this about me. I'm the kind of person who thinks that no matter what, I'm the reason that somebody is reacting differently. Like, if you're not replying, it's not because you're busy. It's not because of that. It's because I've annoyed you.
Yeah.
The same, like, you know, if you're not answering your phone, it's not that you're at work. It's that you don't want to talk to me. Like all that sort of stuff. I build in my own head that no matter what circumstances are going around me or could be going around the person that I'm thinking I've pissed off, the problem is me. And you learning, getting myself to a point that check the facts now happens in my head like that in split seconds. Beautiful, because it's just so much more calming.
Yeah.
And I do tend to find that the one thing though with some skills is that when you get to a point that you're so used to using them, you'll hit a point where your brain kind of stops using them for a while, and you've got to go back to being like, no, dude, actively, you need to actively do this again. And check the facts is very much one of them for me, especially considering to my newest discovery, I'm quite sensitive to rejection or perceived rejection. But the best way to explain check the facts is it is what it says on the tin. Take a second. I tend to find this is helpful. You use stop first. Calm yourself down, ground yourself, then use check the facts. A lot of DBT skills are built on each other, so you tend to find that nearly everything I do starts with stop, followed by 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which again, my favorite grounding technique. I know you're a big fan of box breathing. Like there's a lot of different grounding techniques. It's a case of find what works best for you. But 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is my favorite. Again, on the blog, because I preach that far too often for us to cover it again. Were you going to say something there because you took a breath in?
I don't know whether he might be just going on saying this anyway, but I suppose the practical application of check the facts. So again, from your experience, is it something that you can do just kind of in your own head, play around with it with your thoughts, or did you need to start doing it with a piece of paper? Or
so with things like check the facts, it's about what works best for you. I've always been the kind of person who lives in my own head, and I thought I would be able to learn to use skills in my own head. But it turns out, because there's so many demons living there, that I had to write down at first. Now I don't have to. It just happens in my head without us thinking about it.
Yeah.
So at times I used to carry a notebook with us everywhere I went, just a little blue notebook. It was a Libra notebook because I am what I have recently had referred to as a space Nazi, apparently. But it wasn't. You can cut that because I probably shouldn't have said that anyway. But it was space racist was what I was actually called. Space racist, yeah. You can probably bleep that. But anyway, I don't give a shit. I used to carry this little blue book, and when I needed to use a skill, and this is where I'm going to start with the whole. You have to be okay with the fact that your brain is going to tell you that you look stupid. You don't, quite bluntly, nobody's paying that much attention to you.
Right.
No matter how much we all like to think that, most of us don't even notice things. We're just NPCs in other people's lives. But, that is how it works, because in our heads, we're the main character, therefore everybody is looking at us. If you need to whip out this little notebook and sit down and just zone into checking the facts, just do it. Because while you might be worried that people are looking at you going, what the fuck's she doing? What's more important, your long-term wellness and recovery, or the fact that Bob down the street thinks you're weird because you sat on your doorstep with a notebook? Who gives a shit? Your long-term recovery is more important.
Is it, if you are genuinely concerned about that, is it something you can do on your phone? Because no one's going to think twice about you looking at your phone, because everyone's doing it.
Yeah, for me personally, my notebook was better because I like pen and paper. I think you've probably noticed I'm not much of a typer.
Yeah.
Because, born in the mid-90s. So naturally, I'm a pen and paper kind of girl. But phone, notepad on your phone, pen and paper, do it in your own head, whatever. Basically, what you want to do is bring yourself back to being grounded, and then look at the situation through the lens of facts. Essentially, what you are doing is you are fact-checking this situation.
Fact-checking a Sun newspaper article.
Exactly. Bingo. Pascal, collect £200. Sorry. Oh, sorry, I'm now just making silly jokes in my head. I apologise. But you just, I'm trying to think of a good example. Okay, so if I use an example of if I text you, you've left the office and you've texted and said I'm on my way back home. I then text you back saying, can you pop to the shop on the way back? You're not replying to me. My brain, it will immediately jump to, oh my God, he's pissed off because I said, can you go at the shop? Like, and it'll start fucking doing that thing that it likes to do, where it goes like, you are the bad guy. Everything is your fault. How dare you ask anybody to do anything that might inconvenience them?
Yeah.
That if we use that situation as my example here. Granted, I know that to some people that might sound very trivial. Other people might go like, hang on, it takes that level of to get to set you off. No, it can be anything. Like literally, this skill is fantastic in all areas of your life. It's really good for when your manager says, I need to talk to you.
Yeah.
It's really good for like, hey, I've booked you in for a meeting for 3:30 because we need to have a chat. For that anxiety, just check the facts, fantastic in those kinds of situations.
Yeah.
But you're going to take the situation and you're going to fact check it. So if I use that one, the first thing my brain does is say, does Dan actively check his phone when he's walking? No. How long did it take for me to send that response to you? Right, well, you text me 5 minutes before I text you. Okay, so knowing that Dan doesn't check his phone, logically speaking, he has sent you that text, closed his case because he's a weirdo that still has one of those flip cases, put his phone in his pocket. Sorry, I felt the need to make a dig.
I'm an elder millennial. What can I say?
You've put your phone in your pocket and you've headed home.
Yep.
You've set your headphones away and you've headed home. You're not going to check that again until you get in the house. That's got nothing to do with me pissing you off. That is a fact that I know about you, that you walk home without checking your phone. Unlike me, who has a phone in her hand 24/7. It only isn't in my hand now because it's over there. Like, that's a very good example of like me knowing you so well to know that you're not going to check your phone. So that's like quite an easy example to give.
Yeah.
Obviously, it can get more complicated when you're looking at things like if I use the example of, your boss has said, hey, I booked you in for a meeting at 3:30.
Yeah.
Checking the facts in that situation. Right, okay. Boss has called me in at 3:30. Straight off the bounce, I'm jumping to, oh my God, what have I done? What have I done? What have I done? Okay, stop, ground. We're now back on the ground. Okay, is there anything that I am aware of that I have done wrong that this could be about?
Yeah.
No. As far as I'm concerned, I've done my job perfectly fine. Okay. Is it possible that there is something that you have done that you are not aware of that's what this conversation could be about? Well, yes, of course it's possible. But the fact is you don't know that. And then this is the key one that works for me. If it was that bad that you were going to, because yourself, your brain jumps to I'm getting sacked. It's 100% where your brain goes. If it was that bad that it was gross misconduct, so you are going to get instantly sacked for it, would they have booked you in for a meeting at 3:30? Or would they have gone, hey, can we have a word? Well, let's be honest, in a factual situation, if it was that bad, it wouldn't be a meeting at 3:30. It would be, hey, come here. We need to have a conversation right this second. It's not something that's going to wait that long. Okay. Now, from that point, I have checked the facts and said, okay, I know that even if I've done something wrong, it's not going to be that bad. It's just going to be like, maybe it's a bit of a telling off for something that I've done. However, if I'm not aware that I've done something wrong, this is a learning opportunity for me. This isn't a telling off. This is if I walk into that meeting and you say to me, hey, you fucked this up, and I go, right, but if I'm not aware that I've fucked that up, then clearly I don't know that process. So can I please have extra training? And now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of other things that come into that, and I'm using that example where there is a lot of other things that come into play. You might start thinking, oh, I know my manager wouldn't do that, and blah blah blah. You just need to essentially strip the emotion away from the situation and look at it through the eyes of fact checking. And that skill is something that is incredibly hard to learn how to do quickly and efficiently, especially in a workplace environment where you need to be able to do it quickly. But start with basic things. I remember when I was learning how to use the skill, what I was always told was, don't use it don't try and actively use it in the moment that you're stressing out, because you're not going to think about it because it's new to you. What you want to do is use it in situations where you are calm to teach your brain how to do it. So, you know, if I go back to the example of you've texted saying, hey, I'm on my way, and then I've texted you back. In that situation, because I know you so well, I know that you're not checking your phone. However, that's the prime situation for me to look at and go, okay, let's sit down and check the facts on this situation to teach my brain how to do it.
Yeah. So give it like test runs in more of a controlled environment before wheeling it out.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, you know, that's the kind of thing that you want to be doing. You essentially, you know, like that thing of like, oh, it's like if you've been in an accident, you've got to learn to walk again. That's essentially what you're doing. You're learning to walk. Yeah. You're teaching your brain a new skill that it's never used before.
Yeah.
So you need to practice it. It's the same way that like most of us, some of us would, but most of us wouldn't go and sit an exam on something that we've never looked at before in our life and expect to get an A.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, because that's just not how that works. If you've not learned the information, you're not going to get the best mark in the class.
Yeah.
It's the same situation with it when it comes to using skills for your mental health. Like using them on repeating controlled environments that are safe, keyword there, safe to do it. Same with when it comes to interpersonal relationship skills. If you're using those skills with someone you feel safe, using them to teach yourself how to do it, eventually you'll get to a point that you start doing it with people who you don't know, and it works.
Yeah. No. I think as well, like linked to that is if you are testing it out for the first few times in a less safe or less familiar situation, like, and this should go without saying, but it kind of needs to be said. And whenever we talk about these sorts of things, it's like self-compassion and patience with yourself is key. Because, so if we take the example of the boss coming to say, I need to speak to you, like booked you in for 3:30 for a meeting, like employing the skills the first few times, well, especially the first few times, it doesn't mean that you won't have the fear and the irrational emotions. Like, you will still feel them, but then don't take that as a sign that the skills aren't working, because your brain is doing something it's so used to and so familiar with, it's throwing anxiety and fear at you, because that's just what it's done for years and years. It takes time to relearn stuff like that. So yeah, don't be put off if it, like, the first few times you try it doesn't seem to be working.
Bluntly, it's not going to work. The first 10 times you use it, it's not going to work. It's about, like you've just said there, repatterning your brain to start doing it.
Yeah.
Because that's what will bring it down. However, that comment does bring me nicely onto self-soothe. Sure, you're familiar with self-soothe? Yes? No?
Again, like from the name of it, I can pretty much kind of gather, and like, I think it pops up in different modalities.
It pops up a lot with children, and it links kind of quite nicely to when we talk about attachment style in a way, because kids who can self-soothe tend to be the ones who are securely attached.
Yeah.
Whereas like self-soothing, like bluntly, what the thing with self-soothe for me is that you just need to figure out what calms you down and what helps you keep focus on what actually matters. I'll give you an example. I'm doing one right now. I've had this bobble and it got jammed in my hair the other day, so there is a knot of my hair wrapped around it, and I am literally pulling the bobble through my hair, and it's a way, because I can feel, because I'm very well aware that this is me leading this and talking about something like this, I am anxious as fuck right now. My anxiety is through the roof. In order to keep myself calm, I am doing something that is helping me self-soothe.
Yeah. There's a reason why manufacturers of like fidget toys make so much money.
Yeah.
Because they do work. Like, from a self-soothing kind of initial level anxiety perspective, they do work.
Self-soothing as well as something that we all do but don't know what we're doing. We don't realise that we're doing it, you know, and some of us have got healthier soothing techniques than others.
The problem is, though, a lot of it is like they become kind of tells almost. So like, if you know you're an anxious person but you don't want to appear anxious, it's really difficult, because the things that you do to self-soothe, like, you know, people bite their nails or like play with their hair or something, like, we know now that those are signs of anxiety. So if someone looks at you doing that and going, "Oh, you're feeling anxious," and that's like really self-defeating. She's like, "Yes, I am," and I'm trying to soothe myself and doing it. Yeah.
You kind of have to realize that people close to you do know you better than you think you do.
Yeah.
I can give you a prime example. You did this yesterday, and it was mildly irritating, actually. You knew that I was feeling like shit, even though I hadn't said anything, and it was purely because I hadn't said anything. But in my head, I wasn't being quiet. I just was chilling. But you were very well aware that little miss doesn't shut the fuck up, hadn't spoke in like an hour. And you were like, "What's the matter?" And I'm like, "I don't like that fact." However, it is a sad reality of life that people that you are close with are going to recognize when your behavior changes. And, you know, again, it comes back to who you feel safe with and who you feel safe talking to, like, you know, making sure that you have got people who, I don't want to say trust, because like, trust's one of those big scary words for a lot of people, but like, just feeling like, oh, like I can relax. Like there's no judgment here. Like, even if you take the prime example of yesterday, like when you're like, "What's the matter with you?" And I was like, bluntly, I don't fucking know. There's nothing particularly the matter. I just don't feel good. There's so many people in my life that I could say that to, that would be like, "Oh, you just need to get a grip, man." Or like, "Come on, do this, do that." And you were like, "Okay, like if you want to talk, I'm, you know, where I am. If not, then, you know, sound like fine." You know, feeling safe to be able to say to somebody, and as well feeling safe to say to somebody, "I don't want to talk about it." That's like such a key thing. Anyway, I was going.
Sorry, I know it's kind of my fault. I kind of dragged it away a little bit. So self-soothing. So because these things that we do, like the things that we fidget with and stuff, there's an element of them being like passive thing. Like we don't actively choose to do them necessarily. It's just something we do when we're feeling. So is like, in the DBT sense, self-soothing, is it more of a kind of conscious effort to do things that self-soothe people?
So self-soothing DBT is a distress tolerance skill. So it is designed to be used when you are stressed, like when you're up a height and when you need to calm yourself down quite quickly.
So it's something that you know works and you would consciously do.
Same as the one thing for me though with self-soothe, I kind of started to bring it into my day-to-day life a little bit more. And I have a monkey called Albert the monkey, as in Albert Einstein in monkey form. He is a green monkey.
Just what I was going to say.
Green monkey. I've won him from a fair where apparently I'm a better shooter than most people, so watch out. But anyway, and just to throw out there, he's called Albert because I have a collection of stuffed monkeys named after scientists. I do not give a fuck what that makes me look like. Do not care. Anyway, so I got to a point where with him, I would carry him in my backpack all the time. And I remember some people saying to us, because that was the way I used to self-soothe. I could put my hand in my backpack and literally just be able to feel that Albert was in my bag, and it would bring us down. And I remember people saying to us, "Oh, you're not preempting the fact that you're gonna have an anxiety attack though. Like, it's as if you're telling yourself, like, oh, if I have a panic attack, it's fine." Oh, sorry, correction. People used to say, "When I have a panic attack, it's fine because Albert's in my bag." And I used to say, no, it's the knowing that if I need him, he's in my backpack. And like, bluntly, especially when you're early in recovery, fuck it, do what you need to do. Like, because unfortunately, a sad reality of recovery is that the second R stands for relapse. It's gonna happen. Like, in your early stages, it does. Because you're still learning. It's like if we go back to learning to walk, you know, it's not one of these things where we see a baby take their first steps and now all of a sudden they're never going to fall on their arse again. They do. They fall on their arse quite regularly because until they learn how to walk properly, and then they do. It doesn't happen as often. it might happen every now and then it'll get better and better and better. I'm a grown woman. I still fall on my arse. Don't get me wrong. Normally alcohol involved, but not the point. Like, it's the fact of life. And I did find for me personally that once I became okay with the fact that I was going to have me little relapses because I was learning, and it's a learning game and it takes time, it actually made the relapses less intense. which is an interesting thing. I feel that could end up on a tangent though, so I'm going to try and just pull myself back here. Again, self-soothe is kind of one of those things that I don't want to spend loads of time talking about, but purely because it is very subjective. The big thing is, don't get caught up on it being an object. Like, you need to be able to touch. You've got 5 senses.
Well, I was going to say this sounds like it's getting into the realms of like sensory processing stuff, and like there's so many different ways that can work for you, and like whatever, you know. I was just thinking that and looking at the cushions that we've got in our laps right now, and like
I'm literally I sit like this, and we both do all the time.
There's a reason why things like this are designed the way they are, because it is like, you know, you associate cushions with comfort, and it's nice to kind of have a comfort cushion that feels nice to touch and stuff. But yeah, like you said, there's 5 senses, so you know, I mean, so would like putting music on, would that be an example? Or,
do you know what mine is? Gum. Chewing gum.
Yeah.
I find, especially in the kind of environment where you do not want people to recognize that you are self-soothing. For me, there's, I know you're going to pull a face, Airways do licorice gum. And you
know what, it's both the Airways and the licorice part of that makes you want to heave, but if it works for you,
like,
that
for
sounds
that,
like the worst combination I've ever heard of.
You'll find I've normally always got like licorice gum in my bag, or if I can't get that one, I get another one that I know has got a really strong taste to it. So like, I tend to find the strawberry ones quite good, because although the taste dies out quite quickly, it's quite like a shock to the system, and it brings us back down very quickly. Quite often, I mean, I don't know if you ever noticed, when we worked at the office, I would 9 times out of 10 have gum. Or I'd be like, if I didn't have any, I would be asking my team, hey, has anyone got any chewing gum, please? And it was a way to self-soothe without making it obvious that I'm self-soothing, because that works for me.
I suppose it's be amiss not to say that, you know, vaping is probably the most common way that people self-soothe today. And again, it's similar to the maintenance stuff. It's like people do it just without really fully appreciating what they're doing.
Actually, really quickly on that one, if you are a smoker or a vapor and you smoke/vape as a way of self-soothing, when you are in a situation that you cannot have one, breathing pattern. Do the breathing pattern of smoking. I shit you not, it sounds ridiculous, but it works, because although we would like to say, it's the nicotine that calms us down. No, the nicotine's the bit you're addicted to. The breathing pattern is what is helping your brain calm down.
Yeah. Well, you get a lot of like these tools to help people stop smoking, and you see a lot of other ones where it gives you something to kind of inhale, even if it's just pure air. It's just that the act of doing it, it kind of helps.
Yeah, like literally, like I've seen me sit at my desk and be at the point that I'm ready to rip somebody's fucking head off their shoulders, because I'm like, I need a cigarette, and just do the breathing pattern as if I'm smoking, and I calm down enough. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't bring us down the same level as a cigarette does, but it calms us down enough to be able to get to my next break without ripping somebody's head off their shoulders.
What would you say, like, to someone who would be like, you know, there's various different techniques to self-soothe, but clearly some are like better for you than others. Yeah, because you wouldn't want to advocate like, a good way of self-soothing is to vape or to smoke, especially to someone who doesn't vape or smoke. But like, when I suppose when you're in the point where you're using these skills to kind of get through like day by day, like would it matter so much to you what those skills are? Like, in an ideal world, I suppose it would be you'd only be doing healthy things. But if you're someone who just needs to utilize things that you know works, even if maybe long term it's not something you should like continuously do, like, would you still advocate for doing it?
My answer is yes, but there's a reason that my answer is yes. If you are at a point in your life that survival is the key, like, it's not about it like, bluntly, like, I'm just going to be fucking blunt. If you're at a point in your life where the fact that you've made it through the day without killing yourself is impressive, then I don't give a fuck what you've got to do to make sure you make it to tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Like, if you are, especially if you're already a fucking vapor or a smoker, like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like, then who gives a shit? Like, I can't count how many times when I was unwell, like very unwell, people would say to me, like, oh, you should really think about quitting smoking. Well, I only actually went to vaping last year, and even, I'll be blunt with you, 2 weeks ago, I stood in the garden and had a cigarette because I was so stressed out. Like, it is what it is. Same way that people go, oh, you shouldn't drink so much caffeine. Oh, you shouldn't do so much of that. Oh, you shouldn't do so much of that. Bluntly, mate, the fact that I'm breathing is quite fucking impressive.
Yeah.
So if what I need to do right now to guarantee that I am still here tomorrow morning is to go and pump, I don't even want to know what's in a fucking vape, man. I don't. At least with a cigarette, I knew what I was doing, but you know what I mean? Like, if I need to go and have a handful of draws off my vape to be able to guarantee that I wake up tomorrow morning without having taken a shitload of something the night before to guarantee that I don't, then I'm going to do it. Because right now, my recovery in my mental health journey and my recovery is the most important thing. Once I am well, and I have been well for a considerable amount of time, then I will start taking steps to get healthier in other aspects of my life.
Yeah.
Because what good is quitting smoking if quitting smoking is going to mean that it takes away my only self-soothing technique that right now might not be the healthiest self-soothing technique, but it's a self-soothing technique.
Yeah. Quick, obligatory comment on society that I do every video, but it's very telling that I think you can read a lot about our society where you look at the things that people tend to use to self-soothe and how readily available they are. Like you walk down any high street in the country and you're going to pass a vape shop, a fast food place, a coffee shop, like all of these things. Like the way I'm kind of seeing it now is it's just ways of like getting you through the day because you're all, well, the vast majority of you walking around town at the minute are either on their way or walking away from a job that stresses you out and you've got other responsibilities and personal shit going on. Like, look around you. There's loads of little things that you can do to sort of make yourself feel a little bit kind of better and carry you through moment by moment. And it's just a shame that, the focus obviously is on the less healthy stuff.
One key point that I just want to make really quick because it's related to this. If you're a self-harmer and that is your way of self-soothing, that is the one thing that I will not advocate for.
Yeah.
However, I do have some fantastic techniques to help. As an ex-self-harmer. Ice. Ice is beautiful. If you can, because I would imagine that most people are very similar to myself, that back in the day you would fill your tray with water and you would make your own ice cubes, and some of them would be in cool little shapes.
Yeah.
But most of us don't. We just buy a bag of ice these days. Go and buy a bag of ice, stick it in your freezer. When you've got the urge to self-harm, go and get your block of ice, and wherever it is you want to harm yourself, rub it up and down. So for me personally, I'm a big fan of taking a block of ice and just up and down my arm. It releases the same endorphins for me personally in my brain as what it did to just take something sharp. And I'm not the only person who said that. From my experience of speaking to other people who self-harm and other people who I've recommended this to who I know self-harm, they've all said the same thing. That shouldn't work, but it does. Again, it's not going to take away the urge to do it ever again or anything like that, but it is enough to allow your brain the time to calm down and then use a grounding technique to bring you away from the act of self-harm. Because that is the one thing that I feel like needs to be stated. I will not advocate for self-harm. I also will not advocate for you harming somebody else as a way to self-soothe, no matter how much I do agree that would probably make me feel better too, but not the point.
No, I know, and I suppose I've led it down a little bit of a discussion that maybe you weren't intending to have, but
no, but I think it's a very key point to make.
Yeah.
So self-soothe, the one that we weren't going to go on about for too long. 20 minutes later.
I'll try and just let you talk about this thing next time.
It's all right, don't worry, because I'd rather you ask anyway. So wise mind's beautiful. This is the one where I'm going to say, the explanation that I am going to give is not the explanation that you will get if you look at DBT online. This is how I've interpreted accessing wise mind and viewing it to be able to utilize it in my own life. You know me now as a very logical thinker. Like, obviously there's been plenty of times where I've been like, right, okay, we need to go X, Y, Z. You need to go through B and C to get to D, like that kind of thing. That's kind of come from learning to control my emotions. But I used to be a very emotional thinker, like unbelievably. Like, if I felt hurt by something, then I don't give a shit. Like, all bets are off. I'm thinking purely emotionally. I'm going to react from a purely emotional standpoint. Both of those are not okay. You don't want to react out of pure logic, and you don't want to react out of pure emotion. Reacting out of pure emotion tends to give you a very negative thing, because you're going to say things that you don't mean. You're going to, like I don't feel like I need to kind of over explain that. Same with logical thinking. If you focus purely on the logic without considering your emotions, you're going to do yourself a disservice. And that's also a place where resentment can stem from, because if you're thinking purely logically, like if you use the example of with your partner, you're like, oh, I'm not going to mention that that's irritated, is because logically it shouldn't have. So therefore I'm going to say nothing. But then because you've said nothing, the action still continues. And in 6 months' time, there's resentment there. Then you're going to pop off and you're going to be like, oh my God, that drives me insane when you do that. And they're going to be like, this is the first I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? But in your head, you've said it repeatedly when you haven't actually said anything out loud.
I like that, because, again, I think a criticism I have of the way that people present CBT, I'm not saying CBT per se, because I know that there's different ways of doing it, but like the common understanding I think people have is that kind of, checking your facts and like applying logic to an emotional situation and saying like, well, you're really upset that someone blanked you, like, oh, well, like it could mean X, Y, and Z, like let's be logical about it. But then, yeah, it has the negative consequence of, like just burying that emotion down. And like, it's not healthy to ignore that emotion. It's not healthy to be led by it either, but it's not healthy just to completely ignore it. So.
Yeah. And DBT is really good at what it basically does is teach you how to communicate that effectively. Like, more than happy to do like videos on more in-depth things to do with how to kind of manage conversations and stuff like that especially around things that you find quite emotionally challenging. Like, there's no harm in getting yourself into the correct emotional state and approaching that person who, when you've had to check the facts on that situation earlier. Like, for instance, if I use the example from Check the Facts, there's no harm in when you arrive, me going to you like, hey, like, can I just check? Are you pissed off at me? For you then to go like, no, why would I be pissed off at you? For me then to respond with saying, oh, you didn't respond to my text. And for you to go, oh, no, it's just because I put my phone in my pocket and I didn't read your text.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are some people who then would get all very like, oh my God, you always have to make it like as in like, oh, I'm such a dick because I didn't text you back. And it's like, no, like that's where the other person also needs to take on board certain skills. And there are also DBT skills to do with conflict resolution that will teach you how to bring that back down. Again, I think I know I've said this before about there is a time we're a big fan in society of saying like, match my energy. I need somebody who matches my energy. No, you don't. No, you don't. Not in certain situations. There are certain situations where the best thing you can do is completely unmatch their energy. If somebody is up a height, meeting them at their level is just going to escalate the situation, bring it back down. Again, I've harped on about that. I know that I definitely harped on about that when we were talking about men and women interacting in the comments section on TikTok. Yeah, bring it back down. Where was I? Wise mind. Yeah, sorry. Hello. Welcome to apparently I have ADHD this episode. But yeah, so wise mind is all about bringing yourself to the emotional point in the middle where you can be logical but also consider your emotions at the same time. A lot of people refer to it as gut instinct. Like, it's like your gut feeling that something's not right in this situation, or like, have you ever been in a situation where you feel perfectly fine and then somebody else joins the group and all of a sudden you've just got this gut feeling that you should maybe shut your mouth for a minute?
Yeah.
Like, it's that essentially, like that same kind of feeling is what you want in your brain of like, hey, something's telling, like if I use that example, if somebody sits down and something in your gut goes like, do yourself a favor and shut up for a few minutes and just to analyze the situation. No one ever tells you to ignore that. Like everybody says, listen to your gut, like listen to your instincts. Like that's like that is somebody's energy telling you that you need to do something. And there's no harm in listening to your gut and just like taking a step back and giving it a minute to understand the situation. That's essentially what Wise Mind is doing. You're considering that. The way that I always kind of do it is like when I get an emotional response to something, bluntly because of the way that I am as a person, the way that my brain is wired, 9 times out of 10, that emotional response is incorrect. It's going to be OTT, 100%. Like it's just completely fucking over the top. But then I got into the habit of swinging too far the other way, so I would totally ignore the emotion and deal with pure logic. Again, like you've just said, neither of those are healthy. You want the middle ground.
Yeah.
I can come to somebody with a situation and say, hey, I understand that there is no logic to how I am feeling right now, but it does not take away from this is how I am feeling. And what I would like to do right now is walk you through this is why I feel that this is what I feel. And this is what I'm feeling. And again, it comes back to the safe person or safe people. Because there is unfortunately some people in the world who you might go to and say, hey, I understand this feeling's completely illogical, but I just I need to let you know that this is how this has affected me. Even though I am fully not expecting you to change your behaviour. I am fully not expecting anything from it because I am aware it is irrational. That's Wise Mind.
Yeah.
Being able to recognise, like, this is irrational, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm feeling it. The same way that it is being able to say this is totally illogical, but it doesn't take away from the fact that this is what my brain is doing right now.
Yeah. I think it's really important to point that out because we do place a lot of emphasis on logic over emotion. That's just something that gets ingrained in us from an early age. It's like you garner more respect as a person who doesn't give in and isn't led by emotion, and they kind of use their logical brain. It's if anyone studied like classics and like philosophy and stuff like that, was a big thing about Greek society was the goal of mastering yourself is mastering your emotions and being purely driven by logic. But I think this what we've been speaking about kind of highlights the difficulties and the drawbacks in that way of thinking, because it's foolhardy to say that we're not emotional creatures. Emotions, feelings, emotions, like whatever, like they're really important guides in terms of like what we should and shouldn't do, and it's also very arrogant for people to assume that they know always in every situation from a logical perspective what's best, because we don't, nobody has that sort of mastery over their own mind. It's very difficult to have that level of like control over, like Freud talked about it a lot. You have the conscious level, which is like the tip of the iceberg. Everything else underneath the sea, like the rest of the iceberg, is your subconscious and like all the stuff that you're not always on a daily basis aware of. But maybe that's where gut feeling comes into it. Like some people would say it as like, your gut, trust your instincts. Maybe like it's something deeper down in your brain that's sort of giving you a warning signal about something, and you're not gonna do yourself any favors by not heeding that at the same time.
Sorry, I was just thinking, like, Jesus Christ, how many bloody conversations? Because for anyone who's interested, these kind of conversations are exactly the same conversations we have off camera as well. But like,
sometimes there's a camera in front of us, sometimes
like, how many times do we talk and and one of us will say to the other one, right, okay, I've noticed X, Y, and Z, what's going on? And the other one will go like, honestly, consciously nothing. However, I am very well aware, or like I've become aware recently that maybe this is triggering this thought that I haven't really dealt with, or like that I've never thought about before. Like, there is a lot that goes on behind the surface, essentially, like under the surface, not behind the surface.
Yeah.
I went to say behind the eyes and under the surface at the same time. Like, and you're allowed to be aware of that, but also know that your feelings are, it's perfectly okay to feel something, which brings me very nicely to something else that I'm a very big believer in. You need to work out why you jump your primary emotion.
Yeah.
Primary and secondary emotions.
Yeah.
So most of us have how for the way you're saying, yeah, I'm assuming this falls under CBT as well.
No, it's more obviously whenever I've done work on anger is probably the most common secondary emotion.
That would be me all over,
yeah.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. You're essentially jumping what your primary emotion, so how you feel about a situation, you'll jump that straight into a secondary because your brain essentially does not want to deal with the primary, so it jumps to something that is for you comforting and familiar and you know how to handle.
Yeah. Do we go there? Do we mention it again that, like, not to generalize, but men you tend to jump to anger because showing emotion is a sign of weakness. Anger, at least, even though it's not nice for anyone, at least it's expected in a way. Like, people get angry.
I mean, I'll be honest, I wasn't going to go down the route of the majority of it quite often being men. However, now you've said it, I do think quite, like in some situations, a lot of women jump to crying.
Yeah.
However, I am very much an anger-driven secondary emotion person. I am very comfortable with being angry. I'm very comfortable when it comes to throwing things, for the record, not at people, but like I'm very, very comfortable with getting angry over explaining my sadness, or explaining my hurt, or the key one that I've noticed, if I feel vulnerable, I jump vulnerability to anger because I refuse to be vulnerable around certain people. That's like a key thing. Recognizing what your secondary emotion is will help you to understand that, bluntly, a lot of people with anger problems tend to need to do work on primary emotion, on learning how to feel primary emotion, because you're jumping the anger out of fear of dealing with this, essentially, and it's so subconscious. That's the worst part. Like, I always, when I was younger, I always used to get told, and I would openly say, I have severe anger problems, like really bad anger problems. I will just get angry out of nowhere. I mean, some of that was bipolar rage, and some of it was not being consciously aware that I was actually feeling something under the surface that I just didn't want to deal with. So recognizing what your secondary emotion is and why, and then why you're doing that. Again, that's kind of something that you can't really do a lot of in-depth work on your own without like building towards it. You'd need like somebody to be able to help you with it. But recognizing that you're not always actually angry is a good starting point. The wheel of feelings is a good way to go about it, because I know for a lot of people, myself included, labeling your emotions is really hard. I really struggle to label my emotions, and especially when to try and get to the core of what the emotion is. And the wheel of feelings, I've got the app on my phone. I'm doing that like it's there. I've got the app on my phone. And the further out you go, the more words it gives you. And there's quite a lot of times that I've like gone, right, okay, so I've started right on the outside and I've gone, oh, there's the feeling that I'm feeling. And it might be, I'm trying to think of something that I can't think off the top of my head, but it might be something that like I've never realized is linked to this emotion before. So like, I can't think of an example without looking at it, but basically what it does is it'll give you the core emotions in the middle, and then it'll start to spread out to show you what all these other words actually fall under. So that helps you to be able to deal with the core problem. So you might not recognize that you're feeling fearful, because that's not how you feel in your head. You're feeling a different word that, when you pull it back, is actually fear. Essentially. I'll link Wheel of Feelings, the app that I use, because I mean, I can't lie to you, it is very basic, very bog standard. I love it. I'm such a fan. It's just, it doesn't overcomplicate itself. It's just, here is a wheel and here are some feelings. And it's a good way to start to kind of understand what you're actually dealing with at your core, rather than just anger.
They're very complex things, our minds, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are.
going to say someone sitting there thinking like, well, I don't jump to a second emotion because I don't ever get angry. I think another common one is humor. Like if anyone who knows that they would rather tell a joke to like alleviate a tense situation rather than deal with the tense situation, like that is kind of doing that. And it's difficult. It's because with anger, it's like the way it presents. There's more of an onus on you to sort that shit out because anger can cause a whole host of different issues. Whereas humor, like I don't know, like I think other people will look at you and they wouldn't want you to be any different because they quite like how funny you are with like talking about difficult emotions. But for your own well-being, I think if you recognise that you do that, I think it's something to look at as well.
Yeah. And on today's episode, we'll just casually attack Narika.
I mean, look, it's something we both do.
I was just about to say, the worst part was that I've literally just proven your fucking point.
No, I was talking generally and also involving both of us in it because I know that I do it as well.
I know. I just see. However, what I was about to say there was I saw my opportunity and I took it, and that is a key thing that I'll say all the time. Like, oh yeah, I don't actually think that. I just saw my opportunity to make a joke. No, I felt uncomfortable. I made a joke.
Yeah.
Like I literally in that moment there, you said humor. I went, oh yeah, and then my brain went, hang on, what's he talking about? You carried on talking, and my brain went, I feel attacked. Make a joke.
Yeah.
Like, hello, prime example of how we work on ourselves every day. But anyway, moving swiftly on.
So, sorry, so I kind of need to bring things back a little bit because I'm a little bit lost. So, the recognizing your primary emotion, is that another skill we're talking about? Was that linked
it falls under being able to emotionally regulate.
Right.
Sorry, I'm very well aware that I've jumped around a lot here as well.
No, it's fine.
Like being able to regulate your emotions is a key part to being able to function.
Yeah.
Essentially, especially inside your own fucking brain. Like the thing is, if you don't know that you jump emotions, you are going to keep trying to deal with your anger. Well, your anger ain't the fucking problem.
Yeah.
The problem is the underlying emotion.
Yeah.
And I know for a lot of people, I mean, myself included, it can be what can be underlying your anger. It can be things like perceived rejection, perceived disrespect, like feelings of not being good enough, and like as if the world's out to get you, that no matter what you do, it'll never be enough. Like it's a lot of like what's the insecurity essentially, and you do tend to find that when you actually start to peel back the layers of anger and you start looking at what is actually underlying, most of it's linked to insecurity.
And it makes a certain amount of sense because if you know that there's this sort of core inside you that is very fragile, it makes sense that you want to like present to the world something that's more forceful and more kind of harder to kind of penetrate. And anger is that kind of leave me alone, like don't engage in this because you don't want to type thing.
It's a defense mechanism.
Yeah,
bluntly, and it's a destructive defense mechanism.
Yeah.
I think you've just hit the nail on the head. They're like humor's not as destructive to the world around. Humor's not destructive to your relationships, whereas anger is. Like if you're a hot-headed person who can fly off the hand at any moment, you're not going to have a lot of close relationships because even when you do form them, it's not going to take long for the monster to show itself, essentially.
I think equally with humour, like, there's still an element of like if someone constantly uses humour, you're never really going to fully know that person either. Like they'll be likable. People make careers out of being funny and stuff, and people like them for like the jokes they tell and the way that they make them laugh. But like, how often do you hear it where it's like, oh, I don't really know that. Like, I enjoy getting on with that person. Like, they make me laugh. Like, they're fun to be around, but I don't really feel like I know them.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for it. It's because the humour is what they want to present to you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we all do it. We all wear a mask.
Yeah.
Like, but there's a difference between a mask that'll harm you and a mask that won't.
Yeah.
But anyway, so let's like being able to recognize that you're jumping in emotion is a key part to be able to emotionally regulate. Because again, it's like at the end of the day, right? If I go to the hospital And I'm like, I can use this actually as an example because this happened to me when I was younger. I went to the hospital because I broke my elbow. I hadn't broke my elbow. I broke my shoulder, but my shoulder didn't hurt at all. My elbow, oh my God, I've never felt pain like it. If they hadn't have x-rayed me, first of all, that would have been medical negligence, but if they hadn't have x-rayed me, I'm going to be so conscious of the jokes I make now. Thank you, Dan. Anyway, so if they hadn't have x-rayed me, they'd have treated a broken elbow. But I would have still had the pain because the pain was coming from the broken shoulder, not from the elbow. So in that example, the pain is coming from my primary emotion of sadness, not my secondary emotion of anger. So if I treat the anger, I'm still going to have the underlying sadness. If I actually do the x-ray and look at it properly, I'm going to realize that it's actually sadness that needs to be treated, which in turn will deal with my anger. Because I'm not going to be jumping emotions anymore. Granted, some people genuinely just do have anger problems and need treatment for anger. But, again, stop skill is very good for anger.
Yeah. If you want to link it back to Wise Mind, then I suppose, it's as unpleasant as it can be for someone to be displaying anger in front of you. Like, if a couple of seconds later even if they don't fully apologize, but they just sort of explain, like, right, that was a display of anger that came out, but this is what's really going on. And, acknowledging that there's more than just, the sum of the parts there. There's the whole kind of psyche going on there where everything's involved, like the logic, the emotion, whatever. If nothing else, that is also going to help with your interpersonal relationships as well. If you can be, don't fall into the trap of beating yourself up because you got angry. Maybe it's not great that you got angry, but if you can explain it and to someone who's willing to listen as well and give you that patience and that benefit of the doubt, then that's all that can only help. As well.
I feel like it goes without saying, but I feel like it needs to be said. That's a very within reason for how they express their anger, clearly.
I
feel like it doesn't need to be said, but it's kind of got to be said. If someone is physical with you, you need to make your own decisions there. Because I'm not going to get into that. But if it is just somebody is just quite can be quite off the cuff, they've blown for a split second. And then you say 2 minutes later, it's I'm so sorry, this is what's going on, and you just came in the room and started fucking talking. It is I
suppose if you find that you're having to do that every day, then that's probably not good. If it's a kind of isolated incident of you just snap.
I think it was only last week or something. You took your head off, and then 2 seconds later turned around and went, "I am so sorry. I had 20 things going in my brain, and you asked us a question. You got the brunt of it. Apologies." It happens.
The thing is, I think I'm pretty sure my response to that was I didn't even take that as you snap.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, actually, you did, because then I was like, "Oh, that's good to fucking know that that's not me snapping." Fantastic. What? I was going to say, I'm handing you it. I said what as I'm handing you, so there's the proof that I actually fucking heard you. Interpersonal relationship skills, bluntly, a lot of them are fucking common sense, man. And I know that you shouldn't say that, and then you're not allowed to say that, it's common sense. But a lot of it does come down to the person that you're talking to as well. If they're not willing to try and hold a proper conversation with you, you're not going to get anywhere no matter how hard you try.
That's the thing, we're not necessarily advocating for interpersonal relationships per se. There are some interpersonal relationships that probably aren't worth your time and are actually probably more detrimental than anything. But if if you friends or in a relationship or some kind of dynamic with someone that gets this stuff as well, then it's worth working at.
Yeah, exactly. Because I know I feel like we say all the time, communication, just communicating is key, but trying to communicate, the one thing that I really learned on my journey throughout recovery is that it's a lot of realizing how much that goes on in your head on a day-to-day basis links back to things that you wouldn't think the link back to, because I don't want to say just childhood, but like a lot of childhood and adolescent experiences
Mm-hmm.
cause the reactions that you've got today.
Yeah, yeah.
And like, I have been told before, like, sometimes I think you overthink this and you overanalyze it. But if you're not someone who's been through adverse things and had big struggles with their mental health, or like, big bouts of mental illness, you probably don't really understand why this needs to be overanalyzed and over-explained.
Yeah. One of my favorite, this is me using humor again, but like one of my favorite things to do is like, when someone asks like, I've noticed this about you, why are you like that? I just love saying it's trauma. And it's just seeing everyone easy reaction of like, I don't know what to say. But
that's my favorite thing when people go like, you're really funny, you, and I'll go, trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, to be fair, even from the moment that we like started chatting to each other, it was one of those like, we both very quickly became aware of like, you're clearly traumatized because you can't get that funny like without being fucking traumatized.
Yeah.
Like, but no, like again, it comes back to safe people, like somebody who you're comfortable being able to talk to, because the sad reality is that not everybody in this world is going to give you the time of day to do that level of work. And you can, and I also want to say that that doesn't mean that you can't have that person in your life just because they're not willing to do it. Like, some people don't realize that they're not willing to do it. Follow the bouncer ball here. Like, if you've got somebody who, again, is just maybe has never had any struggles before with their own mental health, and like, they've had quite the average upbringing, and they just float through life perfectly candidly and don't really have any problems. You go to them and say like, hey, sometimes when I take your head off because the tea towel hasn't been hung up, it's because like when I was a child I had to be perfect all the time. They're like, what the fuck? Like, what? Like, it's one of those, like, what do you mean that like the treatment of you as a child has led to the fact that you've just screamed at me because the tea towel's not hung up? I'm starting to get the hint that some people might realise, if you watch this quite regularly, that clearly at some point in my life there's been something about a tea towel, because this gets brought up quite regularly. But like that core reaction, that's a prime example of jumping the primary emotion. The primary emotion was feeling disrespected because it had been a repetitive request. So I jumped to anger, head got taken off. Once sat down, had conversation about why this pisses me off and why this makes me feel disrespected. All of a sudden, tea towel is always hung up. Like, because the understanding's there. Now, that person that I'm talking about, who has always, ever since that conversation, hung the tea towel up, they don't fucking get how that chain of events works. They absolutely do not understand that, like, because of something in my childhood, this now means that I get angry when the tea towel's not hung up and it makes me feel disrespected. But they cared enough about me to be able to say, like, that makes no logical sense to me, but it does not make a difference in my life to do that to make you happy. And that's the key point. If you've got somebody who's going to you, hey, I don't understand, but I'm still gonna do the things that you need, or I'm gonna help in every way that I possibly can to make sure that you can, do the work that is clearly helping you, then it's fine. They're the kind of people that they're perfectly safe. What you don't want to do is, in another example, I'm going to stick with a tea towel. I don't get why that's such a fucking problem for you. Right, but like, hear me out here. Like, it makes me feel disrespected because I've asked repeatedly for you to do it and you still don't do it. And like, when I was a kid, it was always, your opinion doesn't matter, like what you want doesn't matter, like I am the adult, you are the child, like you will do, like, be seen and not heard, all that sort of shit. And it's manifested into feeling disrespected when I've asked you to do something and you're not doing it. And their response is, but it's a tea towel. Right, then they're not a safe person.
The thing is that the ironic thing about that is, I think if someone really is that way inclined, where they're like, I don't get why it's such a big deal for you, and that makes them not do it, I think there's something going on with them that they haven't fully even like acknowledged yet. Like, maybe it triggers them being asked to do something. And like, that's their own thing to sort out. That's not your problem, if whatever. But
I mean, I know we've said this before. Like, I'm a very big believer in, if you ask me to do something and it doesn't affect my life in any way, shape, or form, then why wouldn't I do it? It's like I'm not going to go into it, but I'm using it as the example. It's the whole like, my name's Rebecca, not Robert. Okay, I'll call you Rebecca. Like, that's fine. That's not a problem. Please, can you call me they, them? Yeah, no problem. Because that is it does not affect my fucking life in any way, shape, or form. What fucking pronouns I use to you, what I call you. It's just like when I say to people like, hey, my name's Nikki. Nobody's got a problem in calling me Nikki over Narita. So it's exactly the same principle. Like, if it's not it doesn't affect my life, but it makes your life better, why wouldn't I do it? Like, it's that kind of thing. I've gone on a tangent.
I'm trying so hard not to follow you down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Pull you out of it. So, where are we in terms of the skills? Are there many more you want to talk about?
I think the thing is with DBT, I could give you Narika's version of DBT all day, like every day, because I love it. I do find that, I mean, I have a friend who's a psychiatrist, and if she ever watches this, I've got a feeling I'm going to get a phone call going, dickhead, you did not explain why is mine correctly. And I'm going to be like, I know, but this was my understanding, and I think I've done a very good job. And you know what? I use it every day, and it works for me. So this is my explanation. I think, to be fair, there's a handful of like interpersonal relationship skills that are a little bit more kind of complex. Like Dear Man. I'll be honest with you, at this point I can't remember what the fucking acronym stands for, but there's some funny ones that make me laugh, and there's one skill that is called Please Master, and that just makes me laugh every time that I hear it, because I have a dirty mind, so automatically it makes me fucking laugh. I can't remember exactly what it is, but I'll never forget being sat in my garden during COVID, so I still had appointments, but we're obviously social distancing, so I was sat in my garden, and it was with my CPN Morris and Laura, who did my DBT, and we're sitting there talking, and Laura goes, have you been using Please Master? And Morris just went, and I was like, yeah, I've been using, and he was just like, I'm sorry, someone's going to have to explain this, because from where I'm sat, and me and Laura were pissing ourselves laughing, because we're very well aware how that sounds out of context, but again, hilarious. There's a lot of like the interpersonal relationship skills, but I think if you're looking for a start point with DBT, distress tolerance and emotional regulation are your keys. And again, a lot of it's rooted in mindfulness. You want to be utilizing. So you know what? Check out our mindfulness video.
It's always a good place to start, though, isn't it? Mindfulness. There's enough. I think enough people know enough about it for it not to be too jarring and unfamiliar. But yeah, it's no surprise that a lot of these sort of schools of therapeutic support utilize mindfulness so centrally. And yeah, I think you've done a very good job of explaining DBT and how it works and how it all links together. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Do you want to know how I can explain so well? I'm just going to quote what I say to my therapist every time he sees us. Every week when I go to the therapist's office, I literally shut the door and he'll go, how are you this week? And I'll go, right, on this week's episode of The Shit Show. So that is how I have this set of skills, because
yeah, you gained your qualification from the University of Life, as they say.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so that's me on basic survival DBT.
Awesome times. Yeah. Well, hope that was useful for people watching or listening.
Yeah. And if it wasn't, then I just hope the sound of my voice wasn't like a fucking cheese grater. And if it was, then why are you still listening?
Yeah, exactly.
So
there are other things on the internet you can watch.
How to tell us that it's about 6 o'clock on a fucking Monday night and we're recording, because we're both just trailing off.
She would just say, don't be a dick in the video.
Okay. Cool. Don't be a dick.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Bye.